all right, John. How are you today?
Not too bad. Thanks very much, Esther. And thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, that's okay. It will go viral, so expect to get famous very quickly.
You mean when
Where
I
are
crash
you
and
joining
burn?
us?
When
Where
I
are you
crash and
joining us
burn, it will
from
go
today?
viral. I am sat in the car charging up outside at Remarkables Park. Just living the life and running around doing a few errands in town.
Excellent. Okay, so it's your office for the day. We've had a few offices which are car space, so.
Let's be honest. I would normally have a pie, but there we go. We're on camera, so.
Okay, so John, firstly, thank you for running. You're the first mayoral candidate that I've interviewed this time round. Last election, I ran a wee podcast which was called "What Could Possibly Go Right," and we will frame that question today. But what made you decide to run? Because I know you've run for councillor before. So just tell me a little bit about past campaigns and why you're running this time for mayor.
Yeah, so I've run for council on 3 occasions in the past. I think it was 2013, 2019, and then there was the by-election when Nita stood down after the last elections, and I've got 100% track record of being unsuccessful. So I'm probably not the best person to mentor anyone in that. But I mean, I think the thing is, alongside all of that, I'm one of those sad people that reads council agendas at 8 o'clock at night. I've worked through the Glenorchy Community Association at the head of the lake, and to actually get stuff done. So even though you're not in the tent, making the decisions, sort of where I landed was that you can be outside and you can still get stuff done, and still have an interest in what's happening within council as an organisation and its decision making. And so that's the usual submissions, turning up to meetings, so asking people questions. So that's I haven't been a sort of a one-trick pony where I've stood, didn't get in, and walked away, and you never heard from again. Over the years, I've just maintained that interest. And what prompted me this time to run for mayor was, I think it's table stakes is all in. Somebody asked me the other day, "Why are you running for mayor, John?" And I didn't put it politely as this, but my answer was because the current person that is the mayor is not doing a great job. So that's what sort of motivated me to run. And I think what sort of crystallized the decision in my brain was what happened around the Shotover wastewater plant, and the way, not that it happened, but the way it was managed and the way that the sort of decision making and the information was released about that. So that sort of, I think was the final push, and right, that's it, I'm going to go for it.
Okay, so that was a bit of a tipping point for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and I just that's it, overnight, sort of landed on the decision, put out a media release, and that's it. It's like, well, You've come out now, so you're committed.
Yeah, excellent. So with all of that in mind then, because you've just given people who may not know you a bit of a taste of why you've run, I guess what people might want to know as well is who is the John who is not kind of campaigning, and who is the John that what does John's everyday look like, and how has that changed? Because obviously I've known you for some time, so I kind of know some of your background with Kinloch Lodge, and I also know that since 2013 when you first ran, there's a lot that's evolved in terms of your kind of community positioning. So can you just touch on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, so in terms of introduction, being up at Kinloch Lodge at the head of the lake by Glenorchy, 25 years in October. So wow. We bought a rundown set of buildings in a wonderful location, and we've still got slightly less rundown buildings, and the location is still just as beautiful. Tony, my wife, and myself have been there. 3 kids, all born, bred through Glenorchy Primary, through Wakatibu High School, and have all left to go and do the wonderful things in the big wide world. And we, as a small business, we'll be employing up to about 16 to 18 people in the height of the season. Wintertime a lot less. We can accommodate about 50 odd people, and we've got a restaurant. So that's the business. Both Tony and myself want to do things other than just work in the business. Working on the business is fine, but actually there's a lot more to do, and it's part of it is what are you doing, what are you changing, how are you making things better for people, as an ethos. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been involved with a community visioning organisation in the district called Shaping Our Future, which is basically about the great job. You actually get out to ask people how they want things to be in the future, and then work out how we can make them happen. And really empowering. So I've worked with Kingston, Glenorchy, Arrowtown, Luggat, Harweir, around the piece, and I guess outside the day-to-day stuff at Kinloch, that's that sort of community empowerment is my happy space. And because you then help people define what they want their future to be, and hopefully they then feel they can start taking control and working towards it.
Yeah, thank you. So let's just touch on that for a moment then, because I was deputy chair of Shaping Our Future many years ago. But I guess, and I also love what Shaping Our Future does. I guess if we take a kind of critical approach to the differences between council and its remits and its scope versus something like Shaping Our Future. Obviously, Shaping Our Future is much more blue sky thinking. It doesn't have any kind of limitations around it. So you could argue, just to be devil's advocate, that obviously to empower people is much easier when there's fewer limitations to do so. Have you got any kind of commentary on that? Because I know that in your candidate statement, you talked about leadership and empowerment of councillors, etc. So I guess what do you think that looks like from within the realm of the remit of what a council and local authority does and can do?
Yeah, sure. So obviously a council has got defined areas that it's got control of, and things that it does and is responsible for. And the Shaping Our Future process looks across everything. Look at health, education, schooling, transport, sort of a lot of environmental stuff, dark skies, biodiversity, predator control, all the things that most communities are focused on. So council, isn't responsible for an awful lot of that, but it can influence them. And I think part of leadership is working out collectively, what do we want to do, how do we get there, and actually if we can't do it, who else can help? Because just because council isn't responsible for delivering healthcare in the district, it doesn't mean to say it shouldn't understand what good looks like, so that if there's opportunities, council owns land, for example. So, what could council do to, if it was appropriate to have a health facility somewhere, council own land that can maybe sort of help things happen. Council can use some of its rating and development contribution policies to incentivize things that it wants to happen, even though it's maybe not responsible for delivering them. So I think understanding who are the players, how you work together, how you influence each other. So control what you can control, influence the things that you can influence, and advocate for things where you can. And an example of that would be with government. You advocate back to government, put the funding back for all those bus lanes that you stripped out the State Highway 6 corridor, because it's not council's job but to build those, but they're a key part of helping our district be a better place to live and get about. So yeah, we're not responsible for buses, not responsible for bus lanes, but we can still have a view and we can still advocate.
Yeah, and I probably should also point out that council does do that for anyone that's listening, and whether people will have different opinions on whether they do that well or not, but advocacy is a huge part, particularly because with reform after reform, there's been lots of changes, and you can name any particular sector, whether it's roading or speed limits or water, or lots of different components of that in terms of the lack of control that council may have and its ability to then advocate. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to frame this question so that it's not too challenging to answer, and you can kind of answer it how you want. But the question is around, do you have a particular political theory or theories that you kind of believe in or follow? So I'm not specifically asking like how you vote, but more, for example, I personally don't particularly, I don't believe in neoliberalism, which kind of stands for more things like privatization, etc. So I guess it's like emphasizing the individual over the community, or the community over the individual. Or are there any political theories that you kind of lean towards?
Not as specific theories, because I probably wouldn't think of them as theories. I mean, yeah, I've grown up in a socialist background, you know, for over many generations, and I would describe myself as a red green sort of person in terms of my outlook on life. And you know, the basic premise is I'm never going to apologize for wanting to make things better for everyday people, and it's how you achieve that. But that's, yeah, and I think that's what most people want. They've just got different views as to what that looks like.
Yeah,
And that's where you have to be able to have the discussion, stand in other people's shoes, and yeah, understand what is their why. So why are they so passionate? Because there'll be passionate people on both sides of any political decision. So try to understand other people's whys is really key. Because my experience has been shaped by my upbringing, my environment, but that's not to say it's the right one. And I think in the role of a mayor, you know, continually asking, well, actually, what is the why? What are people saying? Why are they concerned? Why are they passionate? And how do we make a decision that you know is pretty acceptable to the majority of the people?
mm. Well, some people just don't have time for the why, frankly, John.
Well, I mean, if you don't understand why somebody's saying what they're saying, then you may as well not bother listening. And
Yeah,
you know, to me, you know, if you don't listen, you can't lead. You know, you need to hear, and that's what I'm doing. I'm out and about trying to get to meet people and listen. I've got a little suggestion box for people to write down. What is the message that you would like council to hear? And you know, if we don't do that well, A, we don't have people's trust, and B, you know, we won't lead. And you know, the mayor's got two jobs: lead the councillors and lead the community. And you know, unless you're listening across the board, you're never going to do that. And I don't think, you know, the community is, you know, I don't think council has the community um, uh, sort of supporting it right now. You know, the community is more on its back rather than covering its back. And I'd love it to be the other way. You know, I'd love it to be, you know, hey, I'm from the council, how can I help? Like, and people not fall over in hysterics. Or to me, you know, if we talk about aspirational success, would be when there's a huge outcry if local government at our level was abolished, because we do such an amazing job that people really, you know, value it. So that's where we need to be, because otherwise we will, you know, we politically at the moment there's huge changes in terms of what local government does, and you know, we're moving more and more centralist in terms of this is how it's going to be. It may as well not call it local government. Yeah, if that carries on, it'll be this is how you will govern locally. Yeah, which is a different sort of thing. So having you know, the community support our leaders is absolutely key, because when it comes to the point that we actually need to say no to something, yeah, at a negotiating table or a regional deal table or whatever it is, you know, you've got to do that with credibility, and you've got to do it with the people who you're talking to, understanding that it's a big issue, and you've got the support of your community.
yeah, thank you. And look, we could delve into many of those. Like, I actually just want to, but for the purpose of this corridor today, it's not going to
Yeah.
happen.
No.
But I think those kind of questions will obviously happen in the hustings and the mayoral debates, and I just hope that people go along, because it is about delving into the specifics of what negotiating with central government actually looks like, and the ability to be able to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it absolutely hugely crucial component to the organisation and to the elected members. So I guess maybe that leads us to the next question, which is, what role do you think ego plays in putting yourself forward, in being an elected member? Do you think that ego is important or not important, or a thing? Like, what does that mean to you?
I don't know. It's what inspires you to do something rather than, look at me. I mean, from the minute I put my forms in, I thought, it's a huge responsibility. And, you constantly think, am I going to be up to the job? How will that look? And so, no, I'm not one of these people that's going to come and go, right, this is how it's going to be, because it's not. It's you can only achieve what you can achieve with the support and discussion of the people who are on council. And yes, the mayor's got a couple of ribbon cutting duties and things like that. And some discretion to set committees and things if that's what the councillors want. But to me, it's a collective, and you're one person. Yes, you're there to lead, and you're there to chair, and you're there to keep things going. You're there to support the councillors, and when I talk about empowerment, that's actually you sit at the council table. You've got a new council, right? How many years of collective experience do we already have? So right, fresh sheet. What would we change? What can we do differently? What are the whys? New people, what do you know? What don't you know? What would you like to do? What do you think we're here to achieve? So we agree our purpose. How are we going to behave? What are the values that we want to share in our behaviour as a collective council? How do we support each other? How do we talk to each other? How do we,
things that seem really obvious to some of us, but not necessarily to all.
No, it is, but there's different styles of leadership. I would say my style of leadership is more collaborative, and I did a Q&A for the Queenstown Chamber of Commerce, who said name a leader that you admire, and I put Rob Scott, who's the Southland District Council mayor, and he sees himself as an enabler. He's not the top dog. He is running a team. He's getting business through the door. Getting as much decision making made locally as possible, and off we go, and let's see how we can get things done. And I think that's what we need to do, because otherwise it's no fun. And if it's no fun and it's not sort of rewarding, why would you stick around and do it? Because it's not much fun, I don't think, at the moment, from the people I've talked to. So
no comment.
Okay, no comment. Well, that's all right. That's a leading question. But from the people that have talked to me, I don't think it's much fun, for a number of reasons. And that can change. We can change stuff if we want to.
Absolutely. So it would be remiss of me to not ask you, do you have an ego? Because I followed that question with everyone. So do you have an ego, John? And what does it look like if you do?
What does my ego look like? Wow. No, I mean, being informed. So what do I think I do well? Let's turn it around to that, rather than ego. So what do I think I'm good at? I think I'm good at I'm passionate about geopolitical stuff that's happening. So what is the wider context in what's happening around the world and within New Zealand? So well read on that. Understanding the processes. So within council, sort of what happens, how it happens. So if I was advising somebody how to do something, I'd be able to say, well, this is what, this would be the best way to get some stuff done, or, signpost the process that somebody might need to follow. I think I'm pretty good at creative writing, in terms of every single little op-ed I've ever written for somebody is always generally being published. I'm comfortable talking to anyone. I'm not going to be the best dressed person. I'm not going to have the best posture. That goes to Ferg. He's just his enunciation. I'm so envious, but that's not me. But what I'm proud about is being authentic. So what you see is what you get, and I'm comfortable in my skin. I have a lot of doubts about stuff like everyone else, but I think in this election, and actually in the world that we're living in, people want to connect with real people. Yeah,
Absolutely.
they don't want a, sort of authoritarian, somebody who says, well, this is what's happening today because that's what I've said, that's my decision. Actually, that's and we're seeing more and more of that. Today's
Yeah.
truth is
Well,
whatever
it's
I say it is.
arguably part of the issue that we have in current politics, and not just politics, but in corporatization and corporate
Yeah.
world and business, is that we've become fixated on holding solutions to everything. And we know that with complexity of problems, this is something I reflect on a lot, is that we kind of jump to providing a very clear solution because it's easy to do that. But the solution itself isn't easy, and it's not necessarily the right one. So, I think it's an ongoing and increasingly more challenging space for politics generally. But thank you for that answer, because I think you interpreted the question. I purposely didn't lead the question too much because I wanted you to interpret it in your own way about what ego is or isn't. But thank you. I think you explained your view of that really well. So I guess some of my other questions you've actually already answered, which are partly around things like, well, I'll frame this one. So how about, could you possibly describe a time, and don't worry if you don't have an example, because it might be too hard, but can you describe a time where you had to really listen, and where through listening it kind of changed your position on something? Because the reason I ask is obviously that around the table, you can hold these views of your own leadership style or what you bring to the table, and then it can be quite confronting if that is completely changed, or disrupted because new evidence or new information or something just comes at you that makes you look at it a different way. Have you got anything that you can say around either how you think you would broker a difficult compromise, or whether that situation has happened to you before?
Well, obviously not in the council situation because I haven't been there, but
No.
in a work situation, when you've been doing something for a number of years and somebody comes along and does it completely differently. They're a new hire and they're doing it, and part of, oh, but we've always done it like this,
Yeah.
So I guess there's two things. There's if somebody just changes everything and there isn't any discussion about that, that's one thing. But if actually somebody says, I would like to change this, and then you can have the question, well, why do you think that's, we should change it? Because at the end of the day, I've only ever worked in one place, and you've probably worked all over the place. So, what's your why? And you go, okay, yeah, why not? And we we all like stress about change, and it can be quite confronting having change or having a different opinion. And I think the thing to focus on, if I was sitting around the table and something came along and it was like I'd never even thought about that, so I think firstly you need to say, well, this is a brand new thing, something we haven't thought about. Should we actually reflect on that and maybe park it? Because I think making instant decisions is not always great, because we tend to revert back to whatever's on our mind or whatever. And I'm good when I focus on one task at a time. I'm not a great multitasker, and I will always give a better answer 5 minutes after somebody's asked me the question, because I've processed it. And people that work with me know that. They'll say, John, there's somebody out front who really wants to do X, Y, Z, and I'll come back in a couple of minutes and let me know what I should say, because otherwise you go back to your sort of whatever's molded you in terms of giving it an answer, and actually processing it and having time to think about it. And collectively, I think that's really important. And I'll give a real good example of that at the council meeting last Thursday, when the discussion about out housing or in housing the water services delivery. And there was a great paper from the staff with the different options and the pros and cons and the consultation and stuff like that. And then bam, right, dropped on councillors' doorstep, both from the staff and from the mayor, was, well, it's been very been made very clear to me politically that if you vote to keep it in, there will be consequences, and that will impact what we can do. Now, to me, I mean, whether that's true or not is beside the point. It shouldn't have been dropped on people at the table. So, because political risk and the political context of decision making is absolutely valid, and it could be perfectly true, but it should have been in the paper. It should have been before councillors. Just in part of the consideration of the options, there is a political aspect to this from central government, and it has been made clear, because then you'd all have had the chance to process that, and accept it and have questions about it, and so where's that come from? Who said that? Are the emails? Because that's otherwise it's not good governance. You're just making decisions on the fly. So it's time to park things. Time to ask other people. I think, and it's going to happen more with 12 people on the council, where you get potentially a split vote and casting votes. And to me, if you have to use a casting vote, I think you're probably being asked to make the wrong decision. I think it's the decision that's come to council should have probably been worked sufficiently so that most people can have a view about a way forward. And I think to repeatedly use a casting vote isn't great, because it brings council decision making down to one person all the time. And I think good leadership would be, I can see we're really divided on this. Let's park standing order, whatever number it is, and we need to have a chat. We can either go away, we can either leave the room, but we actually need to understand people's different positions, their red lines, their concerns a bit more than we're doing at the moment. Can we reframe the decision that would make a difference? Can we have assurances? Whatever it is. But I think there needs to be something better. And that's how you deal with things that come along that you haven't anticipated, or people have raised something completely unexpected. And I think you need to make time for the process and for the people who are making the decision to fully understand what's just been said.
Yeah. Again, that is a conversation that I would love to delve more into for listeners. Anybody that was interested in the water services delivery model, where we did use the casting vote. In that same meeting, I put forward an amendment to standing orders to change the casting vote for the next council. It didn't get through, but casting vote is a discussion that the community can also consider. Because, as you just pointed out, 50% of your democracy is unhappy, which of course happens in modern democracies all the time. You have to ask yourself how effective that is in terms of moving forward with an approach that 50% of the people aren't supporting. So there's definitely numerous ways of doing it, and I have advocated for that strongly. I think the water services delivery model, again, it's come up a few times in these podcasts. It deserves more debate in terms of the public understanding it, because my view of it would be, I'll put it very shortly, would be that central government have taken great responsibility in mandating things or forcibly recommending, and are rushing through this bill, as they are with many others. And for that reason, we consult our community, but they've only got half of the information, and that simply shouldn't be happening. But there's a huge accountability that sits with central government as well as with local government. So certainly not condoning anything that local government has or hasn't done, but I think what we're seeing are symptoms of rushed bills going through, which are dismantling much of our democracy. And so for me, that's actually one of the reasons why I'm not standing. But look, this is not about me. But, these are the kind of interesting corridor that I think people can kind of grapple with the complexities of it when they put themselves in the situation of what would I do in that seat, and how can we collaborate and bring the community along with us. They're becoming more challenging questions when you've got the dismantling effect of legislation reform that we're seeing and the speed at which is happening. So it's a very challenging environment for any mayoral candidate to enter into. But I think at the end of the day, if you can be transparent about your approach and bring people along to engage, as you've suggested that you will, then that's obviously going to be helpful. So look, we're pretty much coming to an end, John. Maybe I could just frame that question that I started with, which is what could possibly go right then? So in the world of John Glover being mayor, tell us what that looks like when it's going right. Think of it as parting comments to our community.
Okay, what could go right? Well, I think what do we need to do? I mean, council needs to be trusted. I mean, it's at a very low base of trust at the moment, so that could only improve. I just don't think it can get any worse. So but we have to earn trust. It's not something you buy. It's not something the consultants tell you what to do. So what can go right is actually we build up and work hard to regain community support. And if we've got that, there'll be better engagement. People won't feel disempowered. They won't feel ignored. That's really good. What could go right? We don't have, I guess, a divided council. And I see sort of division and pushback and exclusion, around the council table at the moment. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's reasonable. I think it probably comes from a position of insecurity. It's one way of management is a control and peer-based management. I would see myself more as bringing hope and inspiration. That's what I want to do. So, and if we can do that and it goes right, that's fantastic. What else could go right? We could spend our money a little bit better. I think every time council spends money, it gets a Queenstown Council prize. We don't have good contracts negotiators. We don't have a chief operations officer. We don't have people that are really focused on delivery and getting max value for everything it spends. And I think the other thing that I've heard a lot is that council could be a much better organisation to do business with. And that's not a reflection on the staff who are working. I think it's just a reflection of the culture of council. And that permeates. And I think there's huge room for improvement. And it doesn't matter who you speak to, whether you're getting a dog license or paying a parking ticket or doing a development or also, trying to get a permit for a village fete. It is really, really hard. And that's at the very local level. And I think we can do a lot of work in that space, which will really impact people. It's great to sit with ministers and talk about regional deals, but there's no outcomes there. There's no money. We can do things locally that will make a huge difference to the people in their everyday life. I don't think most people care about what a regional deal looks like. But, they actually just want to be able to get on with things and it not be too painful for them.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll leave it there because we've definitely gone over time, but I really appreciate your time today and best wishes for your campaign. So thanks a lot, John.
You're right. And thanks, Esther, for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Awesome.